Hello, welcome back for part three of how to stop playing their game and start winning yours. We're going to go over some myths about some things, and we've got a total of 13. We'll probably do half in this video and half in the last video. So let's get into it. So, what are some of the myths? Number one, there is an unlimited amount of money in a trust account connected to your name. No, I don't believe so. I've seen no evidence of such. Everybody has a friend of a friend of a friend who's gotten a black card or some unlimited credit card. I don't believe there's any magical vault. What there is a system that assumes you'll never question how value is created, transferred, and secured in this system. What is real is the system assumes that your labor is theirs. Until you lawfully rebut that claim, they're correct. What we do is teach you how to remove false claim on your labor, not tap into a mythical vault. What is real? When you were issued a name and a number, the certificate of birth, the social security number, etc., you were brought into a system that monetizes your future labor. Your signature becomes the source of energy and value in every contract that you enter into. Your agreements create performance expectations, right? And that's what a contract is. And your silence creates presumed obligations. And an unrebutted presumption is truth. This is where people get confused. The system does securitize obligations, but it doesn't mean that there's some kind of pre-funded account waiting for you to cash out. What exists is a network of commercial instruments driven by trust law, contract law, and assumption. The government and its agencies operate on the presumption that you're the surety for the name, meaning you're the one that's obligated to pay. As long as you don't rebut that presumption and clarify your standing, you'll stay in dishonor, working to satisfy a debt you never consciously accepted. So instead of chasing fantasy, what we teach is how to identify when you're being treated as collateral. You learn how to recognize how your signature generates obligations or extinguishes them. You learn how to rebut false claims on your time, your energy, your capacity, and how to use a lawful process to correct the record so you can take back control over your agreements. In other words, we're not showing you how to access free money. There's really no such thing. We're showing you how to stop being milked. We're not promising treasure, we're just restoring jurisdiction. Um, Myth number two, this knowledge will render you unable to engage in commerce. So you go through this, you'll become a sovereign citizen, right? Well, first off, sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. A sovereign, go look up the word sovereign, go look up the word citizen. I'm not even going to get into it, but it's a way to keep people from coming into their power. It's a way to keep people subservient. You know, you label a whole group of people who wish to be inquisitive one thing, and then you can just say, oh, you're a sovereign citizen, or you don't pay any attention to them, they're sovereign citizen, right? That's all a bunch of malarkey. Um, a sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. Don't even pay attention to that phrase, okay? There is such a word as citizen, and there's such a word as sovereign, but they two mean two different things. Um, so knowing who you are doesn't exile you from the system. Learning the truth about your name, your status, and how the system operates doesn't exile you from the system. What it does do is it gives you the tools to contract clearly, to know when you're acting privately, when you're acting publicly, and when you're engaged in negotiation or business, right? So this is probably one of the most common and paralyzing misunderstandings out there in this community. People are led to believe that once you learn about the name, jurisdiction, private status, that you're somehow disqualifying yourself from participating in society. That's not only wrong, it's completely backwards. So when you learn the truth about who you are, what the name is used for, your standing, jurisdiction, how to contract, you don't exile yourself from the system. What it does is it equips you to use the system lawfully, consciously, on your terms. Commerce never stops. It's like Vegas. The question is, are you entering into these contracts with full awareness? Are you engaging in it by presumption, silence, and trickery? What we teach is how to identify which hat you're wearing. Are you the public agent or the private man or woman? Know when you're contracting in a regulated public capacity and when you're standing in your unregulated private capacity. Use your name when appropriate, but you never confuse who you are with that name. It is a separate business entity. The CEO of Walmart is not Walmart. Most importantly, it's about knowing how to remain in honor as the creditor, no matter which domain you're in. So this isn't about retreating from society. It's about removing the change of obligations, these unconscious obligations, so you can go into commerce as a competent man or woman, not as an unwitting surety or a corporate fiction. Just like Christ walked among the people without becoming part of the system, you too can operate in the world without being owned by it. The Bible tells us that. You are in the world. You're not of the world. That's what that means. So no, this knowledge doesn't disable you. It actually empowers you. It's not to escape the world. It's so you can walk through it with authority and discernment and peace. Um, Number three, I just want to be left alone. Now, how's that a myth? Well, you're in a world where you can't be left alone. Even if you go live on top of a mountain, eventually you're going to have to engage in commerce. I think this is the wrong expectation. It doesn't shield you from anything. And I know the desire. I tend to be a loner, and I like to be left alone. The problem is when you don't know how to fight, that doesn't mean you'll be left alone. It's like saying, I'm not going to learn how to box so that I don't get beat up. Well, your best bet's to learn how to engage in commerce. What we teach isn't a shield from challenge, it's a sword for lawful engagement. Okay. You'll be left alone when your paperwork is strong, when your words are precise, and your footing is correct, when you know who you are and you know how the system operates and you know how to engage in it. Until then, the work's yours to do. A lot of people think, well, the government's at fault. If only the government were different, if we had more Republicans, if we had more Democrat, that's the wrong expectation. That's exactly the mindset that keeps people stuck, waiting, hiding, blaming, instead of learning, standing, doing. Wanting to be left alone is totally understandable. Most people pursuing this path are tired. They're tired of the lies, they're tired of abuse, they're tired of overreach. But here's the truth. What we teach isn't a shield that protects you from the world. There is no such thing until you start talking biblically. When it comes to commerce, your paperwork needs to be correct. Your processes need to be executed with precision. Until then, the system's just going to test you and find you at fault and continue to presume that you are the debtor and that you're going to pay. And you'll be treated according to how you appear on paper, not who you are. So the ideal, if the government just changed everything, would be fine. That's another illusion. The government isn't going to fix anything. We have a pretty good system, actually. In fact, as incompetent as most people are, I would say most folks need more government. The IRS isn't going to send you a letter of apology. It's just the way it is. Waiting for the government to fix your problems, it's a form of bondage, and it's dressed up as optimism. It's not true. What we teach you is how to take personal jurisdiction, how to engage the system from a position of clarity, okay? Not escape the world, but just interact with it differently. So if you're trying to get away from government, you haven't yet learned how to stand on your own 2 feet. It is possible to be left alone, but it doesn't come from hiding, and it comes from standing. And learning how to stand up is a process. It has to be built. You have to have the right foundation to stand up. So another myth is that you'll just make yourself a target. Well, maybe, but if truth makes you a target, what does silence make you? What does ignorance make you? We don't run, we respond lawfully, clearly, and usually in writing. What we do is lawful, but most people are scared of lawful power. Most people are scared of being competent. They want someone to do things for them. So yeah, you may get some attention, but it would be the right kind of attention if you're acting honorably. The kind that forces others to respect you and your knowledge base and who you are and your standing. So can you make yourself a target? Maybe, but what do you want to be? A bystander? A slave? Do you want to be a participant in your own oppression? Isn't that what you've been doing? So fear of attention, that's a natural thing, especially in a world where anyone who stand out gets labeled, misquoted, or flagged. I mean, there's probably somebody watching this video right now is going to put it in a court case and say, look, he's crazy. But that's exactly a tool of control, and it's not going to stop strong, powerful, brave people who are close to truth and close to God from from standing up. Those are tools to keep you compliant, confused, and quiet. And I've been there, but at some point you get to the point where you don't run, right? You learn to respond lawfully, clearly, and like I said, in writing, because what we do is lawful. But lawful power is very unsettling to those who profit from chaos. It unsettles people who are used to seeing everyone around them beg or comply. Go look up the word apply. It means to beg. So yeah, you can get attention, but it won't be the kind you fear. It'll be the kind that says, this one knows who they are. Um, this woman can't be bullied with presumptions. This one isn't asleep. So here's the truth. The system doesn't punish strength, it punishes confusion. It goes after those who don't know who they are, the people who send mixed signals, who lash out emotionally or file sloppy documents without understanding who they are or how the system works. That's not what we teach. We teach you how to document your position lawfully, how to hold others accountable without trespassing on them. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. How to remain calm, clear, and in honor no matter what comes at you. So the attention you receive, if you receive attention, it won't be hostile, it'll be strategic. Because when they know you're competent, they tread very carefully. Not because you threatened them, but because you stood your ground. So another myth is that sovereignty is a conspiracy theory and legally invalid. Let's talk about that one. That's not the way we teach it. That's not the way Jesus teaches it. Critics argue that sovereign citizen and private law theories have no legal basis in modern courts and are dismissed as some kind of pseudo-legal myth. That standing lawfully in the private is about rebellion, but it's not. It's about remedy. Most critics conflate lawful status with internet fiction. All right, and there's lots of it out there. That's not the way we teach it, and it's not the way Jesus modeled it. The problem isn't sovereignty, it's the counterfeit crap that floods the internet. It's mixed with rebellion and delusion and clickbait legal theories. And yes, that version is a mess, but critics love to lump everything together with the sovereign citizen label because it makes it easier to dismiss serious claims. Because when you associate truth and serious stuff with unserious falsehoods, then you label all of it the same thing. But, just because you've got somebody who's trying to put a label over everybody, it doesn't mean that the truth isn't there. So what we teach isn't rebellion, it's remedy. It's not about escaping law, it's about standing in law. All this time you've been using your name illegally. So you have to do it with awareness of who you are, what the name represents, and how contracts bind you unless they're appropriately rebutted. So standing in the private is not about a loophole. It's not lawlessness. It's actually a higher form of respect for the law. It's the original jurisdiction. It started in 1776 in this country anyway. Probably goes back much further, I'm sure, because you didn't have a democracy until recently. The domain of men and women who operate in honor, who try to do no harm to their brothers and sisters, the people who try to take full responsibility for their agreements, that's who we want, right? When someone says that's not valid in court, what they usually mean is they saw a bad YouTube video filled with nonsense, or they heard about someone getting arrested for quoting something in court that they heard, or they never saw someone do it correctly. Because yes, courts should reject incoherent arguments. Courts should label frivolous arguments. But when your paperwork's right, when your standing is established and your process is clean, you don't have to argue. You don't have to shout, I'm living man or woman, or I'm sovereign, or any of that stuff. You just handle the matter privately. In fact, Christ himself stood as a sovereign. He didn't beg for permission. He answered questions with questions. He remained honorable. He remained silent when appropriate. But when he spoke as one having authority. Sovereignty isn't about yelling at police. It isn't about rejecting law. It's about knowing who you are and acting accordingly. And yes, that's unpopular, but truth is very unpopular. And you know what? Truth doesn't require popularity. It's okay for truth to be unpopular. So another thing that we often hear is from critics is that the sovereign citizen and private law theories have no legal basis in modern courts, and they're just going to be dismissed as pseudo-legal myths. Um, that's what many believe, but belief and lawful fact aren't the same. Okay. Um, Many folks believe that all taxation, all government jurisdiction, all contractual obligations are inescapable, and that's not true. Contracts are contracts and they're fluid. Most people assume that once you're issued a birth certificate, once you have a social security number, once you sign a form, you're locked in for life. They treat those things like they're unbreakable oaths rather than what they actually are. They're contracts by presumption. Turn over the back of your license. Where's the contract written? What we teach is this: every agreement you've ever entered, whether it was knowingly or unknowingly, rests on one principle: assumed consent. The system has to presume your participation. It presumes your consent. It presumes that you're acting in the public as an agent for the name, or as an individual, rather. And unless you rebut that presumption with lawful notice, your silence is taken as agreement. So when critics say there's no legal basis, what they mean is most people don't know how to lawfully rebut those contracts. Most people file incoherent paperwork without understanding the rules of the system. And most people don't know the difference between being in the public and acting in the public as the public. But once you learn how to conditionally accept offers for proof of obligation, once you learn how to clarify your capacity, once you know who you are, once you know how to stand in a private jurisdiction through proper notice and estoppel, you'll see that most obligations really aren't inescapable. They're just uncontested. What we're teaching isn't theory, it's commercial process, trust law, contract principles that are older than most all of our court systems. And when done properly, they don't need court approval. They create lawful record. Courts cannot infringe on private contracting. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution says that no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or make any law impairing the obligation of contracts. That is the biggest thing in the Constitution. The most important facet of the Constitution is your right to contract away your rights. That's your most important right, to give away your rights, because every time you enter into a contract, you have to give away some right. If you hire me to wash your windows, I'm giving up my right to not work for you, to not wash windows. Okay? The government cannot tread on private contract. Only in very few instances can they do so. Um, so this path isn't about escaping society, right? It's about knowing when you're contracting, in what capacity and under whose law. Another myth that is often put forth is courts should reject sovereignty arguments and label them as frivolous. I agree. Courts should reject frivolous and incoherent filings. But when you know how to properly put someone on notice, how to rebut, how to conditionally accept, what you do is you shift the jurisdiction and the liability. Most people don't know how to build a claim. We do. So courts should reject that stuff. Baseless filings, misuse legal terms, and they do, rightly so. But that's not what we teach. The problem isn't sovereignty. The problem isn't responsibility. The problem isn't you taking ownership. The problem is not knowing who you are, not knowing the system, and sloppy process. People grab buzzwords off the internet, they file without understanding procedure, and they walk into court thinking there's a magic process or magic words that'll save them. That's not remedy, that's recklessness. That's like stepping in the ring with Mike Tyson and saying, I learned how to throw a left jab, a right jab, shift to the right, shift back to the left, do an uppercut, and duck. And that's going to win the fight every time. There is no one magic process, because all these entities you're acting with, that you're contracting with, they have free will, and your opponent's not going to do the same thing each time. So if there was one process out there that gave you access to unlimited money, what do you think would happen once everyone learned it? Once 10% of the people learned it, 3% of the people. What we teach you is how to build a lawful claim from the ground up, how to give proper notice of your position, okay? How to conditionally accept. See, there's 4 ways that you can accept any offer: silence, argument, unconditional acceptance, and conditional acceptance. Those are the 4 main ways. And 2 of them are dishonorable, 2 of them are honorable. The right way shifts the burden back to the claimant. Um, Most filings fail because they're emotional, not evidentiary. They assert without proving and they demand without offering. In contrast, when you follow a private process correctly, you stay out of dishonor. Imagine going to mediation and you have a mediator there to interact between you and your opponent, your adversary. You can do that without the mediator. That's all we're doing. That's all we'll teach you. Well, that's not all we'll teach you, but that's one of the biggest things we teach you how to do. That's not frivolous. It's not sovereign citizen. God, I hate that term. That's contract law. When courts see a man or woman who knows what they're doing, who's handled matters privately, they are preserving the public peace. They don't call that sovereign nonsense. They call it being competent. So yes, most filings fail. But ours doesn't start with court. They start with getting an agreement with your adversary. That's what scripture tells us to do. Get an agreement on your way to court. And by the time you've moved through this process correctly, court is just where you go to ratify the public claim, the private claim in the public, when your opponent won't be honorable and adhere to the agreement. Okay. So another thing that we often hear is if this stuff works, if sovereignty, if understanding this stuff works, why isn't everyone doing it? Because it takes responsibility. Most people want to be rescued. They don't want to be made accountable. That's like saying if truth worked, why isn't everyone living it? The simple answer is because it requires responsibility, and most people aren't willing to carry that weight. They're not willing to carry it at all. What we teach is not popular because it's not easy. It requires study, patience, honor, self-governance. Not everyone wants to be the author of their own life. Not everyone wants to be the author of their own contracts. Most people want to sign whatever's handed to them and then blame someone else when stuff goes wrong. People want to be rescued. They don't want to be made accountable, generally. Matthew 7 says it, enter the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. This path is a narrow road. It's not crowded, it's not flashy, it's not convenient, but it does lead to peace and self-governance and remedy under God's law, not man's confusion. So these processes, understanding law, understanding who you work, understanding private processes, understanding the tenets of contract, it does work, but only for those who are willing to relearn everything that they've assumed. The people who are willing to stand on their word and take full responsibility for their agreements without blaming or whining or doing any magical thinking. So the reason not everyone is doing this stuff because truth demands more from you than a lie ever will. So that's enough for this video. Join us for part 4.